I grew up in the Fens, the Fenlands of East Anglia, and there's an element of beauty to it, but it's a sort of bleak beauty. It's not a place where people go on holiday. It's not like the Lake District or the Peak District or the Cotswolds or anything like that. It has its own unique, bleak starkness to it. And for me, it's heavily embodied with getting into black metal and extreme metal and music in the first place. These things sort of go hand in hand. You know, I was growing up as a teenager in that area, and it seemed to almost act as a reflection of what was going on in my own mind at that point. So when we decided we were going to do some black metal that was more reflective, was bleaker. It just felt like an idea to bring that together and really channel that landscape through music. That really was the ultimate goal. And it is the golden thread of Fen at any point. If I ever feel that we're veering too far from our original mission statement, I always go, why was this band born? Why are we making this music?
Greetings, Legion. Welcome to another episode of Into the Necrosphere, episode 280, which means we're 20 away from that 300 episode milestone. I sat down for this installment with the legendary Frank Allain, the frontman for the bands Fen and Fellwarden. We caught up live and in person at the Fortress Festival Forum in front of a gathered audience, ostensibly to talk about the making of their debut album, The Malediction Fields. But Frank is a man with a lot to say about a lot of different topics, and so we also spoke about UK black metal. We asked the audience some questions. It was a grand old time had by all concerned, and the fruits of our efforts will be coming your way in just a few moments. But before we get to that, we don't have us any premiere on the Sphere this week, nor do we have us any unsanctioned filth. What we do have is the return of three old bros, known to friends and family as David Haley, Sam Bean, and the almighty Matt Wilcock. Their street name is Werewolves. Their forthcoming album is entitled The Ugliest of All, due for release on September the 19th, and this is the first crushing single to be taken from that record. This is Skull Battering.
Try the fucking ride! There's no beyond blue.
Subtle and delicate in their delivery as always. That was Werewolves, taken from their forthcoming album, The Ugliest of All, with their brand new single, Skull Battering. The pre-order link is in the description to the podcast. Head over there and let them know that not only are you delighted to see them return, but you can't wait to see them back on Into the Necrosphere. And hopefully, at some point, we might even reveal another single exclusively on the show. I have heard the whole album. I can tell you right now, if you're a fan of Werewolves, this raises the bar and then some. Best thing they've ever done. Hands down, bar none. The album is absolutely extraordinary. It is them firing on all cylinders, and I'm very excited to see what the world thinks of it when the whole thing gets released. In the meantime, hope you enjoyed that song. If you didn't, you most likely stumbled onto this podcast by mistake. If you didn't stumble onto the podcast by mistake, but maybe this is your first time checking out Into the Necrosphere, I should remind you that I am joined in my efforts every single week by a brethren known as the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. Together we combine to crush mediocrity wherever we find it every single day of the week, virtually every single day of the week. We do give you Saturdays off, but on a Monday we kick off your week with Horrorwolf 666, and that's hosted by Brandon Legion. On a Tuesday, yours truly casts hexes and slays poses with extreme prejudice right here on Into the Necrosphere. On a Wednesday, we give you a double dose, starting with Everything Went Black, hosted by Mike Hill. We also have Iblis Manifestations, hosted by the Middle Eastern marauder Cheyenne, he of the band Trivax. Mike Hill, the sensei Mike Hill, returns on a Thursday, and he is joined by his co-conspirators, the outlaw Mike Scondado and the Professor Jeff Kashid for Necromaniacs, one of my favorite podcasts of the week, the best horror review podcast you will find here, there, or anywhere. Absolute must-listen stuff, so don't you dare miss it. And then also on a Thursday, we've got Soul Knox, hosted by the sinister minister himself, the Reverend Carl Hykara, and he concludes his journey through the dark, the weird, the arcane, and the esoteric on a Sunday. When I am done talking to Frank Allain, my friends, don't go anywhere, because we've got us a solo news rant this week. I'm listening to new music by Sanguisugabogg, Crypt Sermon, November's Doom, Perturbator, and a bunch of others. I'm also going to be issuing a scathing swirly of the week. To whom will it go? You're going to have to stick around for that one, and I'm going to be answering a couple more Legion questions. So if you've sent in any, who knows, I might just get to it later in the show. For right now, though, sit back as I whisk you away through the magic of the internet to Scarborough, UK, for a conversation between myself and the legendary Frank Allain of Fen and Fellwarden.
So, welcome everybody to the first in 4 installments today of the Fortress Forum. With me is the Watcher of Fellwarden and Fen. He and I had our first showdown last year. Today we're up for the second. Welcome to Fortress.
Thank you, and thanks for speaking to me again, almost a year to the day.
Well, it did cost Dom a lot more money this time around, but he finally came. I've been mortgaged his house 2 times, car sold, and we made it happen.
That's very good of you.
It's awesome to catch up with you again. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is just kind of your general impressions of Fortress this year.
Oh, it's fantastic. Again, it's very, very unique in terms of its atmosphere, in terms of the general feeling and vibe. Everyone's in a good mood. Everyone's by the sea, and the clean air, I think, is helping put people in quite a relaxed state. The curation of the bands is always very impressive. There's always unique sets from acts that you wouldn't expect to see anywhere else. The fact that Agalok have chosen this festival to be their one and only European gig this year speaks volumes. I think it's a very unique event, and this year is better than ever.
I definitely, this is my second time being at Fortress. The feeling this year, there's something celebratory about it. And I was thinking about it last night, and the only thing I can think of is, I think a lot of the same people that were here last year have come back again this year, and in some cases it's kind of like catching up with old friends. You see people you haven't seen for a year. There's definitely a real sense of camaraderie and a real, just really positive energy in the air. And it's fucking awesome. I mean, I've been to a lot of festivals. I haven't felt a festival with quite this much community feel to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like a holiday. It's a holiday for a lot of people. You wander around Scarborough and there's black-clad characters queuing at the fish and chip shops, or buying ice creams, and it's great. I think, as you say, and that feeds into that sort of celebratory, positive atmosphere. But even the locals, there's people pushing their pushchairs past this venue. What's going on in here? And it's like, it's an extreme metal festival. It's like, oh, it's extreme metal is often associated with quite negative, emotions and negative energies. But it's not really the case. A lot of people, everyone here is sort of friendly and in quite a good mood. Obviously when the lights go down and a band takes to the stage, you look at Abduction and they were tearing it up earlier. Obviously that's channeling a lot of that negativity, but it's a catharsis. It's a positive expression ultimately. And people walk out of that room, elated, drained in some ways, but it's always in a very, very positive way.
Mm-hmm. There was I spoke to George Miller earlier about a woman who stopped him, and she was saying like, what is this festival about? And he said it's a rock festival. She goes, are you sure about that? But this is, I mean, what are your observations, or what's your perspective on Fortress as kind of its own entity and a uniquely English festival? Like, I feel like, especially this year, it feels to me like this has become our Inferno or our Beyond the Gates.
Yeah, I think it has, and that's a testament to the organisers and the way that they've got a vision for how this is, this should be. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the preeminent festival in this country for this kind of music, and it's consistent and cohesive. So it very much is in that atmospheric, black metal space. But there's a lot of diversity within that. So yesterday I saw Ossie and the Jupiter in this room, and then later on, the Great Old Ones playing, very, very intense and extreme expression of black metal. But there's a common thread that runs through it. I think there's that sort of sincerity and integrity of expression. I think it is about atmosphere. It's about taking the listener and the audience with you on a journey to some other place. I think it's that transportative element that I think threads through Fortress. And I think that is aligned with the fact that it is in a different space. It's not in London. It's not in what you consider to be a traditional extreme metal venue. And I think that feeds into that. It feeds into that sense of journey and that sense of doing something different. And I don't want to use the word escapism necessarily, because I think that has certain connotations. But there's definitely a sense of transporting yourself somewhere different and somewhere where something that's quite exciting and invigorating.
Yeah, you have to make the journey, the pilgrimage. It does give it a sense of occasion. I
Absolutely, think. We stayed in York on Friday, and then we were driving up yesterday morning, and you are literally travelling to somewhere that's different. And then when you're there, you're then travelling artistically somewhere else as well. And I think that's for me embodies what Fortress is about.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's been your observations of the bands this year? You mentioned a couple that you've seen, but generally speaking, as a man who's got vintage tastes, judging by your shirt, as do I.
Yeah,
what do you think of what you're seeing in 2025?
Yeah, I mean it's great. I mean, I mentioned Abduction earlier, and I think we were talking about those guys earlier, before we had this talk. They represent a real sort of vanguard of what I would consider to be the new wave of UK black metal bands. But then you've got Agalloch playing their first gig in UK soil for 10 years, who represent something from the past, and everything in between. 1349, sort of second, third generation Norwegian black metal. It's a great spectrum of bands, older and newer, exploring that kind of atmospheric black metal sound. And then obviously the bands that play in this room, like Darker and Ossie and the Jupiter, occupying that more sort of neo-folk space. I think it's diverse, but it's cohesive, and I think that's a tough balancing act for a booking agent. And I think it's great that the organisers have managed to strike that balance well again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think curation is as easy as people think it is. I mean, there's also this curation, and there's the logistics to organising it. But I think this year the balance has been superb. Bands of the festival for you so far?
I think I'd probably have to say probably the Great Old Ones yesterday. Actually, I mean, I'm a huge fan of those guys. Anyway, and yeah, they always deliver. 3 guitars all playing sort of different lines, and really sort of combining together to forge quite an involving soundscape. So yeah, but there's a long way to go. We've got all of today. Yeah,
I thought you were about to say that Fen band due to play later on. They are
they'll be okay.
Yeah. Funny actually you mentioning the Great Old Ones, because I had a conversation with Ben yesterday we were talking about our favorite frontmen, and he was very, James Hetfield, 1989 to 1992. And when I went to go see them play, I was like, okay, no, actually, I can see it now.
Well, he's got that white flying V, hasn't he? So
Yeah.
he's kind of channeling that kind of vibe. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Now, again, we were talking about this before we started officially starting this conversation. You guys came as Fen from, the sort of the end of a very barren time for English black metal. But at that time, it kind of seemed like there were all these names starting to pop up slowly but surely. Winterfilleth, Fen, bands like that. How does it feel looking at things now and looking at just how many bands there are versus what you came from?
It's always weird to sort of contextualize the past, through the lens of the present. Particularly when you've kind of lived through it and evolved through it. At the time, until 2004, 2005, it didn't feel particularly lean in the UK in that sense. Because there were always bands doing something. We had acts like the Meads of Asphodel, Axes of Perdition, Code, Void. We had bands and projects that were putting out interesting and experimental, forward-thinking music, but there was no sense of scene. There was no sense of cohesion. The idea of an event like this was just an absolute fantasy. It was very much entities acting in isolation and acting independently and being sort of fiercely individualistic. Fen was when it was formed originally was just supposed to be a studio side project to the main band that me and two of the other guys were in. So we'd been playing around the UK for about 5 years prior to that and making music. And it just so happened that the style of black metal we decided we wanted to explore and create was aligned with other acts that were starting around the same time. So like Woden's Throne and Winterfilleth, obviously that was we were considered this sort of trinity of the new wave of UK black metal. I knew a couple of the guys from Woden's Throne anyway, and they were in a sort of like-minded space. And it did sort of snowball quite quickly from that point onwards. And it took us by surprise. We never intended to be a live band originally. We just wanted to go into the rehearsal studio, jam out some more atmospheric tunes, turn the reverb on the guitars up a bit. And then, sort of a year later, we were playing with Aglock in Belgium. It sort of moved pretty quickly. And I think there was that sense of scene. We were quickly in communication with the guys from Woden's Throne and Winterfilleth. And it was nice to play gigs with those bands, and it felt like everyone was kind of, suddenly you had friends in the scene, and suddenly people were supporting what you were doing, and there was this sense of like, oh, actually, people quite like this, and it's quite encouraging, and then there's more people joining it. So you're looking at it now, and you look at the amount of bands that exist, and the new bands that are forming all the time. It's really exciting to see where it is, and how far it has come.
Yeah. You also came from an era where bands were, really embracing in different ways their English heritage and the in your case, the sort of the landscapes and the picturesque beauty of the country. Kind of talk to me about the significance of that and where the idea for you first came from.
Obviously, given that we're sort of exploring our first out, this is very much a look back at the past and a real testament to our early days. I've been giving that a lot of thought over the last sort of month or two, and it is interesting because I grew up in the Fenlands of East Anglia, and there's an element of beauty to it, but it's a sort of bleak beauty. It's not a place where people go on holiday. It's not like the Lake District or the Peak District or the Cotswolds or anything like that. It has its own unique, bleak starkness to it, and for me, it's heavily embodied with getting into black metal and extreme metal and music in the first place. These things sort of go hand in hand. I was growing up as a teenager in that area, and it seemed to almost act as a reflection of what was going on in my own mind at that point. So when we decided we were going to do some black metal that was more reflective, was bleaker. It just felt like an idea to bring that together and really channel that landscape through music. That really was the ultimate goal. And it is the golden thread of Fen at any point. If I ever feel that we're veering too far from our original mission statement, I always go, why was this band born? Why are we making this music? What is the purpose of this? We always have to go back to that original impulse, and it's been really interesting going back to the first album and really picking it apart and getting into it and channeling the mindset we were in when we wrote that music and then recorded it. Because the landscape is important. but it's just part of it. It's a metaphor more than anything else, and I think that's something I'm always keen to stress. You know, a lot of bands sing about landscape, and it's very much a celebration, and it's very much, you know, this is where we come from. You know, and for me, the honest expression for us in Fen is, well, that was the landscape that was surrounded me when I was growing up. It isn't rearing mountains and dark forests full of goblins, whatever. It's just long, flat, empty fields and spindly trees and unfriendly people every now and then. So it's kind of, so that was what we were channeling. Yeah, and that really is it, and that's where the landscape element comes into it.
So let's talk about that first album. What were some of your best memories, your reflections from recording the first record? Because you guys had done 2 demos, and then you went into a record that, you know, for a debut album, I would say, just as an outside observer, it feels, even when you listen to it now, very, very ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, it was naively ambitious because we had no money and no real idea of what we were doing. So
you didn't have some of that Skaldic curse money that you were able to...
the tenner we got for the... yeah, we spent that on guitar strings. It was just... listening back to it, I've got a lot of affection for it because, as you say, it was ambitious, it was quite naive, and it's quite... There's a rickety charm to it from my perspective, because I know how primitive the process of recording it was. You know, it was basically recorded predominantly live on just a digital 16 track. So I'm recently going back to that. I dusted it off, blew off the cobwebs, and exported some of the tracks because we were learning them for this album. And I've forgotten quite how primitive it was. You know, I'd forgotten we recorded the bass live in the rehearsal studio. So on the isolated bass track, you can hear like hi-hat and snare from where the drummer was playing on it, and it's shocking that we really. But yeah, we stood by it, and I think what also struck me about it was the honesty that was coming through that record, and the sincerity. This is a group of people who, despite the limitation of means at their disposal, the fact they had no money, they were still trying to do something with acoustic guitars and several different keyboard tracks, clean guitars, all this sort of stuff. You know, it involved a lot of sort of creative bouncing of tracks and all this kind of stuff to try and fit it all in. But I think it's sincere. You know, it's not the tightest record. You know, it's not flawless by any means, and we wouldn't want it to be. You know, we wouldn't. Music isn't perfect, and it shouldn't be perfect. And I think some bands lose sight of that, and in the quest for sonic perfection, they strip the humanity out of their records. And I think listeners are fatiguing to that now. And even if people can't articulate it to themselves consciously, I think people are starting to bounce off really overproduced records. It's like, yeah, it's not really sticking with me. And I think it's because the human brain doesn't want to hear perfect music. It doesn't want to hear something that's been ridiculously snapped to the grid, or, you know, just riffs being cut and pasted again and again, or auto-tune everywhere. I think the human ear gets turned off by that. So there's something I've been pondering a lot recently as well, and I had Jensen from The Haunted on my podcast recently. He pointed out something that I'd never thought about quite in that context, but when he said it, it made complete sense. He said he stopped recording to a click track to bring back that space in the riffs, or that space in the playing, because he says if you're recording to a click track, there's never room for you to move outside of that very, very rigid, almost kind of tunnel you're going through. Yeah. What's your talk? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, I hear that. I mean, I think click tracks are very useful in some respects, and they certainly assist with tightness, and they certainly assist with getting stuff down so it's you know, it sounds together and professional. We used clicks on our last 2 records, but everything prior to that was, you know, we were playing with the drums, and it was recorded in that way. And, you know, going back to the Malediction Fields, I'm sort of, it's given me it's made me pause for thought and think, yeah, maybe we'll go down that road again. You know, I think there is an honesty to it. We've been working on some new material recently, and it's really trying to recapture that organic honesty, as you say. Yeah, you can do those sort of micro adjustments of tempo or feel that you just wouldn't get with a click track, because it's merciless. It's just banging along whatever numbers you put into it. But, you know, when you're playing in a band, and music, it's an organic expression. There'll be an ebb and flow to it, almost a sort of elemental ebb and flow that, you know, you can't replicate with programming. So, yeah, it's made me think. It's made me stop and think that maybe we should try and tap into that atmosphere again.
And as a connoisseur of the old guard, I mean, you also probably feel the way that I do about records like Battles in the North, the first and second spell. Yeah. You know, that there was a looseness to the way that those albums were recorded and the way that they're played, but that's part of the charm. And part
Absolutely. I mean, this album is rough. Yeah, it's really rough, and it's great. so yeah, I totally feel that. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's going back to the original impulse. And you know, when you're in a band and you're in a creative project, for me, I'm always in the present and looking to the future. What are we working on now? What's that going to do? Where are we going with that? And I'm probably guilty of not stepping back and taking stock of what we've done sometimes. And this has been a really, quite an eye-opening exercise, going back to the very first record and going back to those early impulses, because it's helping me answer that question. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this, and what are we trying to say? And this is it. It's made me sort of sit back and think. Actually, it's okay for things to be a little looser if it makes it more engaging and it makes it more natural and it makes it more honest. As you say, some of those early '90s records are pretty sloppy, but it's teenagers with 4 tracks, or like wandering wide-eyed into studios going, what the hell are we doing in here? You know, but it's brilliant.
What are some of your best memories of recording the Malediction Field? Because I mean, as much as I get the sense that it was challenging and a struggle, you must have had an absolute blast as well.
I remember being quite nervous because the EP we did, Ancient Sorrow, came out, and that was the demo. So we recorded the first EP as a demo and put it on MySpace, which was, you know, back in 2005, 2006 was, you know, I know people smirk at the mention of MySpace, but 20 years ago, it was an absolute lifeline for new bands reaching out to a prospective audience. It was, you know, I would spend my lunch break at work going onto MySpace, looking at the bands who we were a bit like, and looking at the people who were friends of those bands, and just sending them friend requests to our MySpace page, going, "Oh, you like Necrosphere? Try this," you know. And it worked. We got signed to Northern Silence off the back of doing that, and they said, "Yeah, we want to put this out." And we were like, "It's a demo. Yeah, there's some bum notes on it. No, we don't care."
You said, "Well, it's a little overproduced for our taste," but
yeah, come on, guys,
it's a little slick,
dirty up a bit. Yeah. But it was really quite well received. As you say, it was at that time when Wodenstone were starting to break through. Winterfell was starting to break through, and bands like Drudka and Negurabunjit were releasing kind of albums that were really captivating that atmospheric black metal attention. And then Alcest were breaking through as well, and so the whole sort of post black metal, black gaze, UK black metal thing was there was a sort of upsurge, you know, crest of popularity. We were sort of lucky enough to be part of that. So the EP came out, and then quickly the label were like, right, let's do an album. Can we have a budget? No, not really. I'm like, okay. So we did it. We recorded it the same way. You know, just dragged the 16 track down to the rehearsal studio, put a couple of mics up around the kit, stuck a SM58 in front of the bass cab. I just went home and overdubbed some bits and pieces in my bedroom. It is literally bedroom black metal.
I'm about to say you're credited as the producer.
Yeah, so just recorded we recorded the drums and bass in a rehearsal studio, and then just did everything else in my bedroom. Keyboard player with a synth balanced on his knees, sitting on the edge of my bed or whatever it was. It was just, but you listen back to it and it's like that limitation, that restriction almost breeds innovation. And I think that's when you're in a studio now and you can overdub guitars 1,000 times and you could, we'll just layer the vocals. Yeah, it almost kind of, you can get a bit lazy, I think. You know, we had to make the most of what we had to hand there. It's like, Christ, we've got 2 tracks left. Okay, I'll do acoustic on this one and I'll do some vocals on that one, but I'm not doing vocals on this bit, so I'll put another acoustic. Yeah, and you're forced to really be creative and challenge yourself. So there was that, coupled with the fact that it was slightly nerve-wracking because there was a tension on the band. You know, the first EP, the first few gigs were a bit of a free hit. Suddenly people are like, oh, these guys are interesting. And it's like, fuck, we've got to actually, this has got to be good. And I'm sat in my bedroom with a Behringer V amp. I'm like, yeah, it was... we learned a lot during that couple of year period. And yeah, as I say, spending time with the album again over the last month or so, I've got a lot of affection for it. You know, it was a very honest expression. It is a bit shaky at points. You know, we got some criticism for elements of the performance and elements of the sound, and it's like, well, but it is what it is. You know.
Again, and I think criticism sometimes is a product of its time, right? I would bet there are criticisms that you guys would have gotten in 2009 when the record came out that you won't get today. Because people will go, actually, I quite like the rickety side of things. I like it sounding rough.
Possibly, but you'll get criticism on other facets. You know, it's like, oh God, not those.
Not enough. Not enough Satan.
Not enough blast beats. But no, look. There are always going to be critics. You know, particularly in the era of the internet. You know, everyone has an opinion, and everyone's opinion is valid. I mean, for me, I've been in this game for long enough now that I learn there are certain criticisms which you'll say, yeah, that's fair enough. You know, that album's too long, or that was a little bit, you know, there's some stuff where you'll get people are offering opinion and they're offering criticism in good faith, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. You know, as I say, nothing's perfect. If I felt we'd made the perfect album, I'd stop doing this, but it'll never happen. So it's, you know, the journey continues. There are times when people just, you know, it's not their cup of tea, it's not their kind of thing, and it's like, well, that's fair enough, you know, it's not, that sound doesn't work for you. And then there are times you will occasionally get a hatchet job, and it's like, all right, okay, sorry.
I was going to ask you, because I had a conversation with somebody about this earlier as well. As somebody who's been in the game for a while, but you are a, you know, true, you know, through and through artist. How do you process criticism? Is it something you pay any attention to when you see something? Because as you kind of alluded to, people can post this really flippant shit on social media now, and almost rubbish what would be 6 months of work for you. How do you manage that?
I think anyone who says they don't read reviews or they don't pay any attention to criticism is being kind of dishonest. We're all human beings. We all have emotions, and we wouldn't be making art if we didn't value it. You know, we wouldn't be putting something out there if we didn't stand by it. So when someone, you know, writes 50 words, you know, of just like, God, what's this shit? It's not that it hurts. It just feels a bit lazy and a bit kind of like, come on, you know, at least take the time to contextualize this. And we have had negative reviews where I've looked at it and I thought, you know what? I can see why you're saying that. And if someone's put thought into it and they've expressed it in a way that is, you know, they've taken the time to actually articulate it properly, I'm like, okay, look, we will have a difference of opinion. You clearly don't value what we value, but, you know, I respect your right to say that, and I can respect the fact that you've expressed it well. I think it's always good. You can get trapped in your own little bubble sometimes when you're this deep in it, you know, and it sounds like a cliche, but you know, it's hard to switch this off. You know, most days I disappear into my music room for an hour or two, just to, you know, it's always there. So when you are that deeply into it, sometimes it's difficult to self-edit or difficult to sort of take a bit of a step back and say, is this actually the right direction to go down? And sometimes criticism is useful for keeping you grounded. So,
what's the wildest thing that somebody has ever said in either a Fellwarden or a Fen review?
Christ.
I'm going to go to the Watcher's house and kill him for making a
No, I
song.
mean, we've had people just deriding us as like just talentless hipster hacks. We got one review that was just like, and this one really annoyed me, and what annoyed me, it was on a site that I quite respected, and but they were questioning our motives as a band. They were like, this is just trend hopping bullshit on something. It's like, these guys are just kind of, and I was like, well, hang on a minute, you don't know us, and that you're kind of projecting a little bit there. And I felt that was, I thought that was a bit much. It's like, yeah, if you've sat down with someone and you can make an assessment and you talk to them about what they're doing, and you sort of think, I think this guy might be a little bit disingenuous, that's fair enough. But to make that judgment from afar, having never spoken to somebody, just basing it off of a record that we probably haven't even got the record, but you've probably just got some digital files sent to you by the website editor. I was like, that's a bit stiff.
And also trend hopping. I mean, I think the last thing you guys could be accused of is trend hopping.
I mean, it's difficult because, you know, bands inspire other bands, and you know, we often get accused of being Agalloch clones. But I only actually really got into Agalloch after Fen had started. I mean, people tried to introduce me to them in 1999, I think, around the time when Pale Folklore was coming out. And it didn't work for me at that point. I was very deeply immersed in more aggressive black metal. I was really into like, I was getting into Thorns and that kind of stuff, the more discordant style of things. So for me, I was just like, this just sounds like Opeth. I'm not interested. And then when Fen started and we started getting some comparisons to Aglock, I revisited it around the time I think Ashes Against the Grain was coming out, and I was like, actually, this works. I can see that. But our inspirations in the early days were really not particularly black metal. I was listening to a lot of post-metal bands like Isis. We were listening to shoegaze bands. Slowdive was a big band for me. The first Verve album. A lot of post-rock. So Mono and Mogwai, stuff like that. And obviously classic bands like Fields of the Nephilim. That was a huge band for me. And I wanted to try and channel that through a black metal prism. Little did I know that there was a French guy doing exactly the same thing at the same time. So he came out and said, what's this Alceste stuff? I'm like, oh Christ. That sounds familiar.
But there's also just a question of people grow up in similar generations, liking similar bands, similar artists, and that's going to feed into what they ultimately end up making.
I do, and this isn't trying to. I genuinely think that is true. For me, Fen, the big thing was like, it's like Bergtat era Ulver meets Fields of the Nephilim meets Slowdive. That was like a sort of trinity thing. And then when we met the guys from Aglock and spoke to them, like, we just want to do a black metal Fields of the Nephilim. I'm like, so do we. It's like, but this is it. And you've got similar characters that have grown up in a similar way, in similar times, deriving their influences from similar sources.
So on the docket now for you, obviously I know you did the Fellwarden album came out last year as well, and you did the show, Fen, memory serves me correctly, was 2024 as well?
No, the last album came out 23. Actually,
I remember the album cover very clearly. Trying to place what year it was. What have you got on the horizon now?
Really want to get, and we've been working on a lot of material. So there's a lot of stuff written. We've been demoing some material ourselves within the band. Just need to get some stuff recorded. Really, we just need to get it shaped so it is now an album rather than a collection of ideas and songs. And then really lock in on the imagery. Most of the lyrics are written, the concepts are there. It's just that final phase of sort of shaping and sculpting. So we're now ready to give birth to that record.
You strike me very much as a music fan first and foremost, rather than kind of black metal man or whatever the case may be. Have you ever given any thought, or would you branch out into doing something completely different?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've dabbled in doing bits and pieces. Sort of. Within Fen, we've sometimes done little neo-folk bits and pieces here and there, and I have toyed with the idea of maybe doing like an ambient-y, sort of dark folk type thing, which is still very aligned with this scene. Bands on this stage have been playing that sort of thing. I'd love to do some electronic stuff, but I wouldn't know where to start because I'm a complete Luddite. But I've been listening to quite a lot of ambient electronic and IDM stuff. I'm up for that. It's just finding the time. This band and other projects take up an enormous amount of time, and then there's the small matter of going to work. So it's kind of
balancing that with the day job.
It gets tougher and tougher as you get older.
Yeah. Yes. Do your colleagues at the day job, are they aware of everything that you do?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them, I've been busted by a few of them. But no, it's interesting because more people than you give people credit for are open-minded. You sort of think as soon as something sort of stumbles across it, and they're like, "Is this your?" I'm like, "Oh shit!" And they're like, "Oh, it's quite cool. I like this and I like that." I'm like, "Really?" And then all people will be, "Oh, I play the guitar as well," and you end up bonding over different things. So it's. I used to be very secretive about it because I can't face dealing with this. It's, "Oh, you're in a band, yeah. What do you sort of play? Where do we start? What's the frame of reference? Heavy metal? Oh, yeah. What like Led Zeppelin? Yes." It's kind of like so. But I also think in a weird way, like metal and theatrical rock is a little bit more in the public consciousness now. You look at where the legacy bands are. Metallica are still one of the biggest bands on the planet. People at work are like, "Oh, you're going to go and see Metallica?" I'm like, "No." But they're huge, and their new band Ghost are absolutely everywhere. Sleep Token seem to be, I don't think I've ever heard a note, but they seem to be really big apparently. So I think there's a little bit more acceptance of that sort of thing.
There definitely is. I mean, I worked in, City of London in the most pinky ring wearing posh sod environment on the face of the earth, and that was definitely something where I kind of constantly felt pressure to keep the volume down on stuff that I was into. And I've certainly found nowadays, I mean, the CEO of our company knows about the podcast. I have said, please, under no circumstances, listen to the news rant, because I want to keep my job.
Yeah, there are certain elements you need to fence off, but it is more accepting. I mean, I work in the city as well, and there are a couple of guys in my office with long hair.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one. It's incredible, So I think, looking at other things, you look at Lordi performing at Eurovision and stuff like that. There've been other rock and metal bands at Eurovision, haven't there?
I think
Hammerfall do something.
There's some sort of token rock bands at most Eurovisions, at least after the Lordi thing, but I don't follow.
But again, I think that's sort of funneling into this kind of more popular consciousness acceptance of the aesthetics, and if not, you're not going to see Abduction on, Good Morning Britain anytime soon. But you know what I mean? It's kind of, they're going to be less shocked at somebody with long hair shouting over some distortion.
The day I see Funeral Mist making their live debut at Eurovision, that's when I'll know we've truly arrived. I mean, now's our time.
The day I see Funeral Mist making their live debut, full stop, would be...
Yeah. Right, we're going to allow you guys to ask some questions. So, since I don't know any of your names, I'm just going to point. But stick your hand up or come to the front, however you want. But if you have any questions for Frank, now's the time to table them. And the other thing is, I fucking hate silence. So I'm going to start pointing to people if people don't start asking questions.
I've got a question. It's a bit woo, but how do you feel when you play live?
How do I feel?
Yeah.
Hot a lot of the time, to be honest. Particularly in that bloody room over there. No, it's a mix of emotions. If it's going well, generally quite sort of exhilarated. If it's not, and that's normally due to the fact that maybe the on-stage sound might be a bit challenging, you channel it and you power through it. So normally quite sort of focused, energetic. I think, exhilaration is probably the word I would stick to the most, because that's the moment when you're in the immediacy. That's when, past, future doesn't matter. You're in the present and you have to be there. You have to deliver. And you've got to take all that stuff, that 20 years of history doesn't matter at that point. It's what you're creating and delivering at that precise moment. So there's a lot of pressure, but that pressure kind of is expressed in that way. But hot as well, very, very hot normally.
You and I were talking about something before we started this chat, your worst concert experience, and it is fucking hysterical. So that is one worth sharing.
Are you want me to? Right.
Yeah.
So we, I don't know if anyone ever went to the front line in Ghent. Put your hand up if you went to that venue, but we played there. I think it was when we were touring with Nagura Bunjit. And I love the city of Ghent in Belgium. So I was like, yes, we're going to Ghent. And people I spoke to who knew it were like, no, that venue is shit, man. I'm like, I bet it's fine. It was really shit. It was really bad. It's like there wasn't a backstage. The backstage was like up a sort of metal staircase in like a concrete courtyard to where there was like an upstairs back room. But there was like an overflowing sewage pipe going over the stairs. So there was just like raw sewage like splattering over the stairs to get to where we had to store our stuff. So that was nice. And then we got into the venue is probably about the size of this part of the stage. And we got in there and I thought it was, my first thought was like, okay, this is the corridor that takes us to where the venue is. And I suddenly saw like a little stage at the end of this corridor. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. There was only one plug, so I could either plug my amp in or my effects pedals. So I was like, okay, well, it's got to be the amp. So it was guitar into amp, so quite raw. And the earthing wasn't right in the venue, so I was getting a lot of electric shocks from the microphone. So every time I was doing vocals, it was like someone was stabbing needles into my lips. So it wasn't very enjoyable. But you learn,
But by contrast, best live experience ever. If you think about if today you were never allowed to play live ever again, what would be the one memory that you have of playing live that you would say that was the peak?
I mean, it was probably when we played the Houses of the Holy Festival Aptenau in Austria. It was it's quite a big thing now, but back then it was quite a tiny little festival. It's in the mountains. You drive for miles, and the venue is literally like a lodge on the side of the mountain, and you perform on the sort of front porch area. And literally, the audience is just sitting on you're sitting on the side of the mountain in front of you, the mountainside. And we were sort of just sound checking, and the main guy who organised it, this big, sort of hairy bear Austrian man, is like, "Oh, do you have quite a hypnotic, repetitive song that you could play?" I'm like, "We could do. Why is that?" So, announce it, and then we will light the beacon fire. So what they do during the headlining set is when you start playing this kind of, we decide to loop one of our songs, like just quite a droning riff, and they basically do this torchlit procession up the side of the mountain and then light this massive beacon fire at the top of the mountain. And yeah, I think when we were sort of stood there just cycling that riff and watching the torches go up the mountainside in the night sky, and then just suddenly seeing the flames leaping off this massive wooden sort of like structure, we were like, this is cool. So yeah, I think that has to probably take the crown.
All right, more questions. Fire away, and then you.
Okay, so when you're doing like the Malediction Fields record, and you're describing there the kind of the naivety of when you were making stuff, and you think, in 15, 20 years, whatever, surely some stuff must have improved as a musician in that kind of time. When you are going back to then, rehearsing and playing something like that tonight, do you have to kind of, how do you strike the balance, I guess, of like returning to that material and having all of the knowledge and, kind of skill that kind of gained as a musician playing live or whatever in that time, and kind of applying it to that kind of old material? Or is there a sense of almost trying to tap back into the sort of ricketiness, as you say, of when that record was made?
It's not so much sort of tapping into the ricketiness, it's more tapping into the spirit of how that was written and how it was recorded. So it's not like we're deliberately going to try and be slightly sloppier. We want to do justice to ourselves as a band. We want to play as well as we can at all times. It's more about getting into the mindset that we were in when we wrote that material and when we recorded it. And it's and again, it's part of that when you're having that moment of reflection across your career, and you realise how far you've actually come. It's when you're not stepping back, you just take it for granted, I probably hadn't given us enough credit for how much we have progressed in those 20 years, because you're just doing what comes naturally. But you then listen back to it in context, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, we really have developed. It's not to say that, but one thing that did strike me about that is, yes, there's a ricketiness to it, but as Jackie said, it's also quite ambitious. And listening back to some of the isolated tracks, there's actually a lot more going on than I'd given it credit for. And there's actually more intricacy than perhaps I have given ourselves credit for. So I've actually been surprisingly impressed by ourselves 20 years ago, if that makes sense. It's like, oh, we actually weren't that bad. It's so yeah, for us it's a question of, it is a little bit more simple than what we do these days. That's just part of the natural evolution of yourself as a musician. But the spirit was genuine, and that's what we're really trying to capture. So I think that is going to be that's the main priority for the playing the set today, is to really channel that spirit of that album, use the experience we've developed over the last 20 years to enable us to communicate that in the most effective way possible. We want it to be tight. We won't be using clicks. There'll be no backing tracks or anything like that. So it's still keeping that honesty of expression. So yeah, but it has been interesting listening back to listening to yourself 20 years ago playing, and it's like, actually it wasn't that bad. I was quite, it's more just the technical limitations. It's like, but yeah.
The thing is, there's a lot of those limitations as well. Like, I think part of why it would be ambitious is when you're younger, you don't have those self-imposed limitations, like, oh, that could never work, that could never work. You're almost willing to try anything. Yeah. And maybe that's where some of that creativity and that openness came from on that first record.
This is exactly it. We didn't know anything else either. As far as I was concerned, that my digital 16 track was an incredibly advanced piece of equipment. I was like, this is amazing. We've got 16 tracks to play with. This is great. So for us, it was like, well, yeah, let's put some acoustic guitar on this. We've got a spare track. Let's put an acoustic thing down here. So there was that sense of like, open-mindedness, and we can do what we want there. But yeah, there is that bloody-mindedness as well. It's like, we're going to do this. We want to make this as textured and as layered as we can within these means. But yeah, I mean, it's not that we didn't. It's not that we were fearless, but yeah, we weren't. You can't help but get a little bit more jaded as you get older, and some things don't work out as you want them to, and you get a bit more kind of like, yeah. But it was, there is a sort of youthful optimism about that, which again, it is an inspiration, and that's something that we're trying to tap into. What were we as people back then? What was our artistic ambition? Have we lost some of that? Do we need to recapture it? Have we started becoming a little bit too, this is what we are now, and we'll just stick to what we're doing now? Or do we need to take stock of our whole journey and communicate that?
Last question.
So I've been listening to you guys well over 15 years at this point. I think probably since around the time that Epoch came out. And as you guys keep putting out albums, I always notice this huge evolution in your sound. Just like, it's like no album is exactly the same. There's always new things that you're adding in there. And to agree with them, it's very much not trend hopping, right? If anything, I don't think there's many bands in this kind of sphere that sound quite like you guys. Whether it's like you're doing just the very, the giant one song that is Winter, or you're going more aggressive with Monuments of Absence, or just all sorts of things that's in Carrion Skies. So when you guys are writing when you guys are writing these records, do you go into it like, I want to try incorporating these sonic elements or just these themes? Or is that something that happens a bit more organically as you continue going through the process of songwriting?
It's kind of a combination, really. I mean, when we start work on a new album, the first thing we do is, right, what did we do last time? And how can we move the band forward? How can we move forward and do something that challenges ourselves, potentially challenges the listener, but that isn't just completely incoherent, isn't just a complete hard right, hey, we're going to release a synth album or something. It's got to be, at this stage, Fen is now, we're just custodians of Fen. I say this to a lot of people, we're just custodians of the entity that is Fen, and we now need to ensure that we're looking after that and shepherding it correctly. But I think the other terror I have is of sort of self-plagiarization and just doing the same thing again and again. Some bands don't seem to be worried about that, but yeah, the idea of putting out two albums back to back that are basically the same it's kind of terrifying. And just the fact, and I think sometimes you can do that accidentally without realizing it. If you just write without boundaries, I'm just going to do whatever comes to me, you might accidentally self-reference. So when we finish an album, we'd have a bit of a sort of debrief, if you will, and it's like, right, where are we feeling this is going to go next? Where are we thinking about traveling? So obviously we did, like, the classic example is we did Winter, which is, and we set an ambition for that. So at the start of Winter, I was like, right, I've been listening to loads of Yes. I want to do a black metal Tales from Topographic Oceans. That's what I want to do. I want no riffs repeated. We're going to make it one long song, bang. And after that, I was like, right, we've done that, and that's kind of about as far as we can go with that. If we go any further down that road, then we're going to disappear up our own asses. So we need to just take a step back and try and... So when we did the Deadlight, we decided we wanted to do something a bit more concise, a bit more sort of focused, and that was the challenge. Okay, the last album we were writing, 15, 16-minute long songs. Can we deliver our message in 6 or 7 minutes? And that was the challenge we set ourselves then. So that was the nucleus of them, that set the framework for where that album then travelled to. And then with Monuments to Absence, it was like, okay, we're all feeling a bit angry at the moment. We want to deliver something that's quite intense. There was a deliberate mission statement to make that album a bit more intense, but retain the intricacy. Winter was obviously a very overtly progressive record. With Monuments to Absence, we wanted to weave that progressive elements in a little bit more subliminally. So on the surface, everyone was like, oh, this is their black metal record. This is their most direct black metal album. On the surface, quite possibly, but there's actually quite a lot of progressive elements, going on under the hood, maybe.
Frank, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Always a blast catching up with you.
Indeed. Thank you guys.
So
Thanks
much
for coming down.
For everybody
Cheers.
that attended.
Driving rain, as mine comes
There you have it, my friends. The final installment of my Fortress Festival footage. It's a bit of a mouthful, which is why I tempered my words there carefully. But I want to say massive thank you to Frank for his time. Massive thank you to you if you turned up to that conversation. The Fortress Festival Forum will be back next year, and we're going to make it more interactive, more fun, more engaging. If you did show up this year, huge thanks to you. I also want to say a massive thank you to the great Dominic of Three Nation PR, a fucking man's man, if ever there was one, as well as a huge thank you to Gary at Reaper Agency for the second year running, giving me the pleasure and privilege of being part of Fortress Festival. And, you know, like I said, on the videos that I did, I should add, my favorite festival experience I think I've ever had. It really was a huge amount of fun this year. Best atmosphere, best vibe. I don't give a shit whether you live in fucking Timbuktu or Moscow. Make your way there if you haven't been there, but move fast because them tickets are selling out really quickly. I think they've already sold out 60% of the overall capacity of the festival at this point. So yeah, if you are going to come next year, best get cracking on booking yourself those tickets. But I had a blast. I hope you guys had a blast listening to that show or listening to that conversation. And like I said, we'll be back next year for more of those. I wanted to talk very quickly about something that is pretty exciting. A new label out of the UK has launched called Serpent Sun Records. They're starting to announce some of their first signings, and one of them really caught my ear. Wanted to share it with you. The band is out of Greece. They're called Nox Formula. They put out an album on Dark Descent Records back in 2017 called Drakon Darshan Satan. And I'm going to play you a track off that record in just a second, but I'm kind of doing this by way of congratulating Serpent Sun Records for getting off the ground and clearly deploying some pretty smart A&R. Keep talking constantly about, a label needs to come around that can sign up some of these great bands. They've clearly done a good job with these guys, and you're going to find out why I've just said that. This is a song by Nox Formula called The Blood Oath of Thagirion. The Blood Oath of Thagirion by Nox Formula out of Greece, off their second album, Drakon Darshan Satan. I speak under correction, it was released in 2020 by Dark Descent Records, but their new label home now is Serpent Sun Records. Make sure you follow Serpent Sun on Instagram, and let's help turn this label into a success. Very much looking forward to whatever they sign and put out next. Very much looking forward to hearing the full-length Nox Formula album that apparently will be coming our way potentially at some point in 2025. But exciting to see a new label, and I'm liking the cut of the jib of the gentleman who runs Serpent Sun Records. He seems to know what he's doing. I like the visuals. I like the whole vibe. I like the bands he's signing. So yeah, I raise a proverbial glass to their success. Right now, my friends, if you found yourself clapping along like an imbecile to Bob Vylan cheering for the terrorists at this weekend's Glastonbury Festival, then ask your mom to tie your shoes and hit the bricks, because this is my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
Well, Legion, it looks like metalstorm.net is temporarily out of commission, which means that we're left to dig through the scraps, dig through the leftovers for something to listen to this week. And we're going to start on Metal Injection with a headline telling us that Enterprise Earth, a band I've never heard of in my life, are streaming a cover of Behemoth's Slaves Shall Serve. Enterprise Earth is here to pay tribute to Behemoth's track Slave Shall Serve from their Demigod record. They say it sticks fairly close to the original, but hot damn is it heavy anyway. Also, shout out to Dementula for the awesome cover art. They talk here a little bit about how Behemoth was a massively influential band for them, blah, blah, blah. Perhaps you can hear hints of Nurgle in Travis's voice or in some of our riffage. I mean, Slave Shall Serve does come from a bygone era where Behemoth were a great band, where you actually could look forward to a Behemoth album, and where Nurgle wasn't completely and utterly insufferable. But that being said, I tend to differ with Metal Injection about the cover art being cool. I think it looks pretty dismal. And I must admit, I don't have the biggest or the highest expectations of what this is going to sound like. Either way, let's give it a quick whirl. If we're giving them their due, they do a great job of, Xeroxing a Behemoth song, because that's really what this is. And I have to sit here and wonder to myself what the point would be of putting out a cover that sounds like this. Like, if you were going to do something as a band that is little known, because I'd never heard of Enterprise Earth before this article, why don't you put out something that where people hear it, they go, shit, these dudes, are heavy. They managed to capture the spirit of the song, but they've put a little bit of their own flair in it. Maybe I need to check it out. Like, here's a great example. Way back in the day, those Satanic Slaughter compilations that were released. I can't remember which label did them, but it was a tribute to Slayer, and I remember there were a couple of bands on there. I'm trying to think who it was that did it. Enslaved did Jesus Saves, and fucking sounded absolutely fantastic. Again, didn't sound like Slayer, but sounded like Enslaved, but really captured the spirit of the song. I'm going to have a quick gander to see who was on that compilation, because there were quite a few bands that I ended up checking out because of the fact that they had brought something just a little different to the game. So on volume 2, you had Dissection doing Antichrist. You had Hypocrisy doing Black Magic. That actually wasn't a particularly good cover. You had Criminally Insane by Edge of Sanity. I actually bought Crimson by Edge of Sanity on the basis of them doing that cover. And then Mandatory Suicide, that was done by The Crown, another fucking fantastic cover. And again, I checked out The Crown on the basis of the work they turned in on that tribute record. So the point that I'm making is, when you're doing a cover like this, it's a perfect opportunity for you to use a song that everybody knows, showcase what you can do, bring your own bit of flair, your own bit of pizzazz to the table, and they've not done that yet. So on that level, they've failed. Technically, thumbs up. I couldn't recreate what they've just done here, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of other bands wouldn't be able to do the same thing either. Travis, for all of his comparisons to Nurgle, spot on. He certainly does sound a bit like Nurgle. He sounds plenty pissed off. The song is heavy, as they say, but it's lacking soul, and in my view, it's also lacking purpose. So unfortunately, based upon that, it gets a thumbs down from yours truly. A band that wouldn't get a thumbs down very easily is Crypt Sermon, and that's off the basis of the fact that they boast within their ranks no less than 2, possibly even 3 members of Daiva. I had Daiva on the podcast, of course, as long-serving members of the Legion will know. Enrique, Steve, and I don't think Frank was on, but I can remember Enrique and Steve were on. And what I will say is, in the wake of speaking to those dudes, I did actually go back and check out the Stygian, and I don't know whether or not I'm mispronouncing that, but the Stygian Rose. Turns out that album is actually way better than I initially gave it credit for. Could very well be because I harbor hate in my heart for the Decibel Top 40 of the year. And so I had just natural bias and a natural aversion to wanting to check it out. But either way, I went back, gave it a proper listen. It's actually pretty fucking good. Not quite as good as Daiva, but great all the same. Anyway, it says here, hot on the heels of their acclaimed 2024 album, The Stygian Rose, Philadelphia-based epic doom metal band Crypt Sermon returns with a brand new EP titled Saturnian Appendices, and that is due for release on August the 8th, 2025. Apparently, it features B-sides and unreleased tracks from the Stygian Rose recording sessions. The EP includes 3 brand new original songs and a reimagined version of Mayhem's De Mysteries Dom Satanas. That's pretty interesting. Originally released as part of Decibel Magazine's exclusive Flexi Disc series. We may have to dig that up and see if we can hear what that sounds like. Only because I've been singing their praises. Yeah, I've just said that a cover of Mayhem by Crypt Sermon might be interesting. Can't exactly show myself up as a hypocrite by assuming they're going to be good when I've just written off Enterprise Earth. So we'll get to that in a second. But let's check out this new song in the meantime. This is going to be out, by the way, on Dark Descent Records. And again, I know that there was a huge amount of love for that previous record. So, I feel like a bit Johnny come lately on this one. But either way, I'm here now. I'm a fan, and I'm eager to hear what their new music sounds like. Right, I'm going to pause there for just a second. The first 2 minutes of that song, if you were to summarize just about everything that's brilliant about 80s thrash, some 80s black metal, roll it all into one, bring it kicking and screaming into 2025, and then just add a dash of fucking magic to it, black occult magic, this is what you would end up with. That is spectacular. Incredible opening sequence. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Slayer, but Slayer taken to a level of refinement that Kerry King could only dream of. Then you got that fucking nasty riff that kicks in, and then when Brooks Wilson, the vocalist, starts singing, yeah, fucking superb. Every single little touch is just absolutely on point. Enrique's drumming, I should say as well, right before the song kind of goes into that mid-tempo roll, he's got this crazy drum roll that he does right before that, and it's just, I say crazy. It's not crazy per se. It's just so perfectly timed. It just suits the song, suits the vibe, the atmosphere of the song down to the ground. Unless they suddenly go into a saxophone single, yeah, this is a top notch without a shadow of a doubt. Let's give it another 60 seconds. Phenomenal. That is beyond top notch. It gets a rarely given beyond top notch award right here on Into the Necrosphere. I absolutely fucking love it. Every element is 10 out of 10. Everything is working together in perfect harmony. You know, I was watching an interview with Gary Holt of Exodus and Slayer, and he was talking about how you can't understand why people hate on bands like Sleep Token. It's great that a heavy band is selling out arenas and doing really well. I kind of get where he's coming from to a point, but years where I have a gripe as an older fan of metal, somebody who's been around to see a lot of different trends, I don't begrudge, even though I don't like Sleep Token's music, I don't begrudge them their success. If a bunch of idiots want to listen to them, so be it. But if metal was going to, like, for me, the real evolution of bands like Metallica, Exodus, and Slayer, we just heard it. This is what real metal in 2025 sounds like. This is something that I think would be accessible to a larger audience, without a shadow of a doubt, if presented correctly. I've never seen these guys play live, but if the live performance matches the quality of the music, I mean, this has huge written all over it. But the difference between this and Sleep Token is that this still sounds dangerous. It sounds menacing. It's got some degree of passion and aggression in. Sleep Token just sounds like a load of toothless bullshit. And so, yeah, I mean, I would very much love to see, a couple of bands rise up, as I've said many times before, and pick up that mantle from the old guard and help take the scene into the future. But I would very much like for the bands that do that to be ones that actually have some fucking balls to them. As Justin Horval would say, actually have some sack. And tell you what, Crypt Sermon has sack in absolute droves. Now, before we get too excited, I did want to check out that De Mysteries Dom Satanas cover that they did, in keeping with the comments that I'd made about the Behemoth cover previously. So bear with me 1 second while I dig that one up, and then let's hear what that sounds like. All right, I've got it. And I can tell you right now, I'll bet my left nut that this is going to be exactly the kind of cover that you would expect from a band of this caliber. I might be wrong, But I think this is going to be absolutely fucking killer. So this was recorded back in 2017. As they mentioned, it was put out on the Decibel Records Flexi series. It is a cover of one of the greatest classics in the history of black metal. As a matter of fact, I'm wearing the t-shirt right now. Let's hear what it sounds like. I rest my case, friends. That's what a fucking cover song should sound like. Sounds completely different, retains the same vibe, the same killer energy, the same evil, but it has Crypt Sermon signature all over it. I mean, that is what competent, excellent musicians sound like when they do a cover song. Kudos to them. That actually instantly rockets up to the very top of the list of one of my favorite covers of all time. That sounds fucking fantastic. A second beyond top notch of the week. Yeah, that sounds fucking brilliant. I would love to know whether any of the Mayhem guys have heard this, and if so, what they think of it. If they don't love it, I'd be very surprised because, again, as I said, I think this is a perfect example of a band that is able to get and understand the intent behind the song and how and why it was written, and then, as I said, just put their own little crease on it. All right, my friends, we're going to go on with some more music in just a second, but I've still got a couple of questions left over from last week's news rant. And by the way, thank you very much to everybody for how positively you all responded to the news rant that I recorded with Cheyenne. Seems you like me and a bit of the Middle Eastern marauder. He'll definitely be back on for another one at some point. And again, I said it before we did before that segment played last week. I think we both went into that conversation expecting to talk about a lot more serious things than we ended up doing. But you kind of have to feel out the conversation. And I could kind of sense as the conversation was going on that, my friend needed a bit of reprieve from the things that he was, probably the very heavy subjects that were weighing on his mind, obviously with things that are going on in Iran, his family potentially being impacted by that. And so, I just felt that was the best place for the conversation to go. And we ended up having an absolute blast. And he thanked me for it afterwards. We will at some point, in probably the not too distant future, we will do an episode where we will talk a lot more seriously about the political situation, the geopolitical situation in Iran. And we're going to talk a bit about South Africa as well. So we've spoken about that separately. If you're interested, that's going to be coming up at some point in the not too distant future. Now, one question that I had, but I cannot for the life of me find where the person is or the name of the person who sent it to me. There was a question around what my favorite caffeinated beverage is for first thing in the morning? And the answer to that question is a flat white prepared by my Siemens EQ 900 bean to cup coffee machine, which, by the way, it was one of the fucking best investments that I ever made. I absolutely love coffee, cannot get enough of it. And so when I got that bean to cup machine, it changed my life. We got another question. This one is from, where's the fucking name on this person? I don't know why it is so difficult today to find fucking messages that people have sent me. It's just horror show. Hardev Singh Rakemo, he asks me, in light of this glorious weather we're having, I've got a food-related question for you. Barbecue fuel, gas or charcoal? That is a trick question, of course, because only an absolute fucking weapon would say gas. Charcoal is vastly superior. Now, if you live in an environment where you can't light charcoal fires, if you're in a flat or whatever the case may be, I understand that. And gas is useful for if you want to, have something to do some quick burgers on or something like that. But 99% of the time, charcoal grill is the way to go. The taste of charcoal is vastly different to the taste of gas. If you think they taste the same, go to the fucking doctor because you've got a problem with your taste buds. Do you have a signature dish that you always grill up, and would you share the recipe? I have many signature dishes. So I've got a couple of different things. Yeah, I've got a Weber normal like Weber kettle barbecue grill. I've got a Traeger. What the fuck is the model? Hold on. The Traeger Timberline XL pellet smoker. And then I've got a Weber Smoky Mountain bullet smoker. Probably the signature dish. What the fuck's wrong with my tongue today? The trademark dish that I do is steak, and that's just partly because I've done it so many fucking times. I mean, you'd have to be pretty good at it by now. I started grilling steak, and this is no exaggeration, from the age of about, I think the first time I ever did one was I was 10 years old. Barbecuing in South Africa is kind of a rite of passage. Fathers and sons do it together, and how it worked with me is my dad handed me a piece of meat, said, there you go. What do you think you're supposed to do with that? And then, I was at the grill cooking it myself. So ever since then, it's become a bit of an obsession. How I do steak now is everything is, and I'll try and make this as quick as possible, everything is geared around enhancing the flavor of the actual beef rather than overpowering it with bullshit. So I've got two seasonings that I use. So how I would kind of prep the steak is I would use some Worcestershire sauce as a binder. So just a sprinkle on either side, rub the meat down with that. Then I do a base layer of seasoning. The seasoning I use is done by Killer Hogs. Actually, not Killer Hogs. What is it called? I'm going to find it for you in a second. I think it's Heath Ryles. Garlic jalapeno seasoning. There we go. Garlic jalapeno seasoning Heath Ryles. You can buy it in the States for $5. By the way, this stuff is fucking fantastic. You can put this on basically anything on earth. So I put that on as a base coat. Then I add some Killer Hogs steak rub just for texture and some added flavor. This one you can pick up at Walmart apparently for $12.96. Again, it is worth every cent. And then I leave it for about maybe 4 to 6 hours. You can leave it overnight if you want as well, but I leave it leave the seasonings to penetrate the meat on the grill. I put it on direct heat for about, depending on how thick the piece of meat is. Normally I cook ribeyes or sirloins, and they'll probably be about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. I cook it on for 2 minutes aside on relatively hot heat to get a bit of a crust on the outside. Then I pull it off to the side on indirect heat. I then let it kind of slow cook until it reaches the desired temperature. And my desired temperature internally is 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is verging on medium rare. Normally the carryover cook is going to get it up to medium rare. What I do while it's on the indirect heat is where the real magic comes in. So I take a 50-50 cut of beef tallow and this really fresh churned butter that I buy from a farm shop up the road from us. I add to that 1.5 tablespoons of crushed garlic. I add a little bit of the Killer Hog steak rub, and I add some fresh ground black pepper. Depending on the mood I'm in, sometimes I might add some fresh rosemary and fresh thyme as well. But most of the time, the rosemary and the thyme you can leave out. The main thing is the beef tallow, the garlic, and the butter, and then that steak rub. You melt that down on the stove before you do your steak, and then you go and brush that steak with it in between turns. And normally, in terms of timing, the turns it'll be about maybe 2 turns that you do if you leave the steak on for 3 minutes aside on that indirect heat, and then it'll be ready, depending on how hot your charcoal is, how hot your fire is. That, my friends, I would put up, and I'm not saying this to boast, I would put up my steak against basically any steak in this fucking country easily and mop the floor with anybody else. So I'm not talking big, but I've done this for long enough that I have yet to come across anybody that can touch me. So if you want to take me on, please feel free to leave a challenge in the comments, and we can even film it. That's how confident I am in what I do. We can film it. We can do anything you want. I've got multiple people that have said the same thing to me. Jackie, you've ruined me for going to restaurants. I can't eat any other steaks other than the steaks that you make me. So yeah, there's very little in this life you're ever going to hear me be cocky or boastful or arrogant about. I'm not even being arrogant. I'm just stating a fact. I'm 45 years old. I've been cooking steaks for 35 years. I have done everything and anything imaginable to perfect my technique. Yeah, if anyone wants to put that to the test, feel free. Okay, let's get on to some more music. And we continue our journey on Metal Injection. November's Doom are returning with a new album. And they've also returned with their first single in 6 years. New album is due out in September, they say. Veteran Purveyors of Darkness, November's Doom, has officially announced their 12th full-length studio album, Major Arcana, for release on September the 19th. It's oppressively hot outside anyway, so why not make the inside miserable as well? Specifically with the track Major Arcana Below. According to vocalist Paul Kerr, the new track represents significant growth for us, exploring new ideas and taking ourselves out of our comfort zone, both musically and thematically, yet we are still staying true to who we are and the artistic legacy we've created for so many years now. Holy shit, that is pretty fucking good, I've got to say. I like November's Doom. As those that pay attention will know, they were on my list of favorite Death Doom albums when I was asked that question a couple of weeks ago. And this is really fucking impressive. I mean, impressive certainly are the pipes that Paul Kerr have on him. At the age of 53, I mean, I think that's might be one of the best vocal performances I've ever heard from him. Musically, these guys sound like they want it. There's real passion in that. There's it is dark and somber and morose music, but at the same time, there's a nice bit of energy to it as well. That it doesn't just feel like they're plodding and staring in the mirror with a solitary tear streaking down their cheeks. Yeah, I like it. I really, really like this very much. I would say the thing that was going through my mind as we were listening to the song is you'd hope that Paradise Lost take these guys out on the road with them when they're touring the forthcoming album. That seems to me like a perfect match. And while they're at it, maybe get them guys from Mother of Graves to join you as well. That's a three band package that if you're into Death Doom cannot be fucking beat. But yeah, I think, my friends, this is probably going to earn another top notch. It's been a productive week. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, great job, November's Doom. And who knows, maybe I'll get these folks on the podcast at some point in the not too distant future. I can't remember whether we listened to "Hold Your Hammer High" by Unleashed. We might give this a quick listen, but I didn't like the previous single, so it's unlikely I'm going to like this one. Before we get to that, though, I do want to issue a very special swirly of the week. So I can't name names on my swirly of the week this week, and there's a very good reason for that. There's also a very good reason, just to set the preamble, why you haven't heard me talk excitedly about Beyond the Gates on this episode so far, and that is because for some fucking inexplicable reason, I've had my visa declined. So just again, to set the scene here, I've been trying to apply for a fucking Schengen visa to go to Norway since January. I finally get an appointment a couple of weeks ago, take everything that I need to there, bank statements, a letter from my employer. I think I even brought my marriage certificate with me, etc., etc. I get a response back from the Royal Norwegian Embassy saying that my visa has been declined because my justification for visiting apparently is invalid. So visiting for 5 days as a tourist is apparently invalid. And if you then take a step back and you think of the brain trust that was examining my application, looked through it and said, this guy's been working for 10 years in a very senior or high up in the corporatocracy in a very senior job in which he earns a lot of money. He recently married a British woman, has been living in the UK for nearly 25 years. Oh, by the way, he's also executed without any problems or incident 4 previous Schengen visas, but now in the year of our Lord 2025, finally, his best laid plans are going to be sprung into action because he's going to sneak across into the border and live in Norway illegally. Decline his visa. You ask me why I fucking hate the government as much as I do. It's because they employ people like this. This is a government employee that looked at that application and was so bankrupt of any discernible intellect that he said, I need to defend my country, and this is what I'm going to do in order to make that happen. Unfucking real. I have lodged an appeal. I'm sure that's going to take ages. Even if they approve it, I have no fucking idea how I'm going to get my passport to them to actually get the fucking visa in. Either way, it leaves me with no choice. I'm going to have to bite the bullet, fill out the 31-page application form to get my British citizenship finally done and dusted. But good God, you can only imagine how fucking pissed off I was when I got that letter back from them. it should be such a straightforward thing. I'm going to the country for 5 days to attend a fucking festival, at which point I'm going to be flying back. The worst thing about this is they even see your plane tickets, your hotel, all of that sort of stuff. We're flying because I'm a nice guy and I don't, I know when I'm taking my wife along, she's not there for the band, so I need to make it nice for her. We're flying business class. What sort of fucking criminal is sneaking into the country on return business class flights? So anyway, we are where we are, folks. I will keep you posted on what happens, but right now it's 50-50, probably more 80-20 as to whether or not I'm going to actually make Beyond the Gates. And yeah, I'm so fucking annoyed about it that as you can probably tell, I struggle to find the words because I don't know how. I mean, I've actually visited the Royal Norwegian Embassy in London. I mentioned this a little while back. Wonderful evening. Save for the fucking loser from the Noise Cartel that wrecked the Sylvain performance for me, but that's a different strain of conversation. But yeah, it was a nice time, great place. But how can they employ a person that's got the kind of intelligence that's going to decline a application that is that straightforward? So anyway, again, as I said, I'll keep you posted. Hopefully, I make it to Beyond the Gates. If not, we'll have to figure out ways to make up for it. But I did have an awful lot of content planned around this, so it now sets me back a little bit. So there's a good chance you guys are going to get a whole bunch of fucking solo episodes come August. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, let's get on to Unleashed. Unleashed have returned with ferocity and purpose on their latest single, Hold Your Hammers High, the second preview from their forthcoming album, Fire Upon Your Lands, due out on August the 15th, 2025. So I don't think this was the one that I heard. I think we listened to the first single and that didn't cut the mustard. But anyway, the song, it's the kind of track that makes it clear why Unleashed is still hailed as one of the big four of Stockholm death metal. Hailed by whom? They were never hailed as one of the big four of Stockholm death metal in my book. But anyway, sharp guitar riffs, massive mid-tempo rhythms, and frontman Johnny Hedlund summoning the wrath of Odin through growls that feel carved from stone. Anyway, we're not going to read through the rest of that fucking dribble, but let's give this song a listen. And I'm going to try and be open-minded, even though I've now worked myself up with all that talk about the Royal Norwegian Embassy. Maybe this lifts the spirits. I doubt that it will, but we're about to find out. Right, I'll give them their due. That was a lot better than the first single. I mean, the first single really was just a load of mid garbage. This at least has an attempt, a visible or an audible attempt to do something that's a little bit different, something that's not just unleashed by numbers. That being said, there is no fucking way that anybody is going to convince me that Unleashed should ever be considered as one of the big four of Stockholm death metal. The big four of Stockholm death metal is Dismember number 1, Grave number 2, Entomb number 3, and then it's a toss-up between Merciless and Carnage. And maybe you could make the argument that Morbid should be in there as well, but I think they're a little bit too short-lived to make the list, at least as far as I'm concerned. Carnage, I would definitely stick in there. But yeah, like I said, this is okay. I don't think it's going to get a thumbs down, but it's not going to get a thumbs up either. I just think this band, and I've always thought it, is extraordinarily overrated. Okay, I think we've seen just about everything that we can see on here. Let's give Metal Storm another try and see if they're back up and running. Shock Horror, they're not. But I know that over on Blabbermouth, we will get to hear a new single by Forbidden. And this is one that I've been excited to hear. You guys know that I like me some Forbidden. Yeah, let's see if we can find it. Apparently not. Fucking goddamn it. Why do they not have it on Metal Injection, I wonder? That means that I'm going to have to do the unthinkable and actually go to Metal Sucks, which makes me fucking sick to my stomach. But anyway. All right. So on Metal Sucks, before we even get to Forbidden, we're going to be checking out a new single by Sanguisugabogg. They've got a new album coming out called Hideous Aftermath, and there's a new single out called Abhorrent Contraception, which is an absolutely terrible name for a song. But anyway, oh shit, death metal bands better get ready, because the boys from Ohio, Sanguisugabogg, have just announced their third full-length effort, Hideous Aftermath, which will be released on October the 10th via Century Media. If you know anything about the bog, it's gonna be fucking brutal. Let's hear what the song sounds like. All right, so let's start with the positives. Music video is pretty decent. It's kind of got it's sort of this fever dream that's halfway between the setting of Mad Men and just sort of like a 1960s Coca-Cola commercial. The song itself, I don't know. I really liked that previous Sanguisugabogg record. Or at the very least, I liked the album that had Pissed on it. Now, what is that album? Is it their previous one, or is it the one that came out before then? Because I know that no, it's definitely the second album. And the reason I liked Pissed is because it had kind of a character that made the song memorable, made the song catchy. A lot of it was due to that drum beat that they use sort of after the 30-second mark of the song. If you know the song, you know what I mean. That just makes the track sound fucking great, and actually the whole album end to end was a fun experience. Nothing original, very very much I think you could pick holes in it if you wanted to talk about something not being necessarily original, but I thought executed well, enjoyable listen for me personally. This, I don't know. I'm not excited about what the rest of the album's going to sound like. And when I first heard Pissed, I was like, fuck, I can't wait to hear the rest of the record. With this one, I don't know. It's just, it's lacking some of that character. Why that is, I don't know. Perhaps it's just a bad choice of a lead-in single. It certainly seems like they've got a serious cast of support players on here. They've got Dylan Walker from Full of Hell, Travis Ryan of Cattle Decapitation. God knows whether Cattle Decapitation is still going to exist in a year's time. But anyway, Todd Jones of Nails. So, I mean, I'm definitely going to want to hear the whole thing when it comes out. But like I said, the song isn't exactly getting my excitement at fever pitch, quite like Pissed did. All right, Perturbator teams up with Ulver for Apocalypse Now, and a new album entitled Age of Aquarius has been announced. Now, Perturbator, by the way, not for everybody. Some people will hear it and go, "Oh, you listen to techno or Into the Necrosphere." That may be, but they do a pretty mean live show. If you saw I think it was from Hellfest last year. There's a clip online where they have this fucking badass looking light show, and just, you know, the music that they did, like the whole performance, just everything is fucking incredible. So absorbing, atmospheric, different to anything that you would have heard. It is interesting to me that the metal scene has embraced them as much as they have, but I mean, I guess I'm a case in point in that regard. So it says here, earlier this year, French composer, producer / multi-instrumentalist James Kent, otherwise known as Perturbator, signed with Nuclear Blast. It was a big moment that had major implications for the future of Perturbator's work, including the new album he was working on at the time. Earlier today, details about the new record titled Age of Aquarius were unveiled, along with its second single, Apocalypse Now. Set for release on October the 10th, the album will feature all of the badass dark wave synths and heavy yet danceable tunes you'd expect from a Perturbator release. Let's hear what the single sounds like. All right, enough of that Depeche Mode light. Let me play you a killer Perturbator song, and you'll understand why I actually like this band. That song, not really for me. It doesn't sound bad, but it sounds very Depeche Mode. And if I want to hear Depeche Mode, I'll listen to Depeche Mode. There's not really a lot of bands that can pull off doing that. Now, way back on an album called Lustful Sacraments, Perturbator did a fucking incredible song called The Other Place. Here's a great example of what drew me to this band in the first place. I'll give you guys about 60 seconds worth, and you can let me know in the comments what you think. That, my friends, is what I had hoped to hear on a new Perturbator record, but apparently signing to Nuclear Blast has taken the very last drops of testosterone from James Kent's body. I mean, that's harsh. Apocalypse Now is not a bad single. It's just not something that I wish to return to. And again, kind of like the Sanguisugabogg track, it's not done anything to make me excited about hearing the new album. So, all right. What other news have we got here on Metal Sucks? Deftones cancel Glastonbury Festival, or Glastonbury Festival set hours before showtime. I would bet my left nut they cancelled it because they didn't want to be associated with fucking garbage like Bob Vylan and all the other clapping seals cheering for Hamas, because I know that they played the following night, and I know people that were at the show and they were posting video on their socials. They seem to be pretty in pretty fine form to me. So I think that I feel like they felt they were dodging a bullet there, and I, for one, completely agree. I'm a free speech absolutist, but if you're stupid enough to fucking cheer along with terrorists, you really are a complete and utter fucking dumbass. But then again, I think that's the going criteria for 90% of the people that attend Glastonbury: an IQ of below 45. If you have sentient thought, you're just not going to enjoy yourself there. All right, I was talking about Forbidden earlier. They return, it says in this headline, with their first new song in 15 years. The song is entitled Divided by Zero. Thrash metal heroes Forbidden are back with their first piece of new music in 15 years. The last album we had from Forbidden was in 2010. That was Omega Wave, which I fucking loved. First song on Omega Wave, Forsaken at the Gates, is absolutely brilliant, and I would argue one of the best thrash songs not written by Testament to be released in the last 25 years, at least. Crazy to think it's almost 2 decades old, a way to make you feel super old. Okay. The song, as we said, is called Divided by Zero. I'm not going to read the rest of the shite. Let's just hear what the track sounds like. All right. I'm going to ignore the obvious AI in that music video because, again, that seems to be stock standard common practice now for just about everybody. I think just on today's news rant, I've seen at least 4 bands do it. The other thing that seems to be the trend of 2025 is what's his name, is the old-fashioned countdown. Please stand by for a feature presentation shite. They do credit Chris Kontos here as the video director and George Anderson for the official edits, but I'm sorry, that's at least from what I could tell, 50% AI. The song itself, I actually don't mind. It's way better than the Dark Angel single that we listened to a couple of weeks ago. Way better. Now, is it Forsaken at the Gates? Well, rather than sit here fucking pontificating about it, let me dig up Forsaken at the Gates, and then you guys hear them back to back, and you tell me. I think, personally, it is absolutely not. I don't even want to get into whether it stands up to Forbidden or anything on Forbidden Evil. But let me just give you a little taste of Forsaken at the Gates, just so we can compare and contrast. That, my friends, is what Tier 1 post-2000 thrash metal sounds like. I think the first and most glaring difference here is between Russ Anderson on vocals on this song and Norman Skinner on vocals on the new track. Norman Skinner, unfortunately, whilst he can carry a tune, he sounds very passionate and very, I wouldn't say very aggressive, but he sounds like he's doing his best. He cannot, unfortunately, hold a candle to Russ Anderson. Not even close. And I mean, this is later stage Forbidden. I happen to be a fan of the Green album as well, which I know an awful lot of people hate. But let's just go back. Let's cast our minds back to another Forbidden song. This one off the debut record. And this might give us another great point of comparison. So this is Feel No Pain. This is one of my favorite Forbidden tracks. Let me give you guys a whiff of what that sounds like.
The song's about international espionage. To help our country's spies, to help them feel no pain.
There you have it, folks. That's what fucking proper thrash sounds like. And I would say this as well, not just in comparison to newer Forbidden material, but if you take that, I mean, I accidentally clicked on the live performance and I figured, who gives a shit? Let's just let that one carry on. I mean, how fucking wild is that crowd going? The energy on that stage, and then just the song itself, brilliant, absolute masterpiece. So yeah, in light of that, I don't know. I'm not as disappointed with Forbidden as I was with Dark Angel. So let's just get that out in the open. I don't want to sound like I'm hating on them, but sadly, much like many of the old timers, they just aren't they're no longer the band they once were. That's just something you can't get away from, which makes the fact that Testament can still compete at the very highest levels that much more impressive, because Jesus Christ, that band has not slowed down. I mean, if you listen to that last album, there are some absolute killer songs on that record. Songs that a band that is a third of their age would give their left nut to be able to write and never would be able to do. So all my shade that I would throw at old Scully D aside, Testament are absolutely awesome, and we need to appreciate them while they're around. All right, let's wrap up on the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music. Blabbermouth, a couple of quick headlines here. Black Sabbath's Bill Ward is nearly finished recording 2 new solo albums. Nice to see Cheyenne starting to put out some more content, as I encouraged him to. More content of the band as they do their rehearsals for this Black Sabbath warm-up show they're going to do. They kind of I think very cleverly interjected themselves into the weekend, and they're doing a show. I think it's in Birmingham on the Friday evening, the 4th, and then I think the 5th is when what's the name play. Is when Black Sabbath play. I might be wrong on that date. Let me just double check that. Trivax live shows. When are they playing? For fuck's sake! Now I'm not going to be able to find the goddamn date because I want it in a hurry. There we go. Friday, 4th of July. They're playing 7:30 p.m. At the Flapper in Birmingham. I think that's a very smart thing to do. Playing the same weekend as the final Black Sabbath show. But what the point that I was making is I like the fact that Cheyenne is now starting to put out video showing what goes on behind the scenes and just helping people connect, I think, more with the band. Anyway, I still don't give a shit about the Black Sabbath farewell show. If you're there, have fun. I would not pay £35 for that, let alone £350. Hatebreed's Wayne Lazinak hopes to get the surgery scheduled soon following a non-cancerous brain tumor diagnosis. That is some scary shit. So good vibes and good luck to him. Thank fuck that it wasn't malignant. But yeah, man, for a young man to get news like that, I can only imagine how much stress that bloke must have been under. So he certainly has my certainly has my good wishes and well wishes going his way. Will there be a second Control Denied album? We haven't stopped thinking about it, says Steve DiGiorgio. This is taken from an interview with Andy McKay Smith of the excellent Scars and Guitars podcast, a great podcast that I strongly recommend, and you may soon hear me as a guest on there. He spoke to the almighty Steve DiGiorgio about the status of a second Control Denied album. It says here, the effort is the final material recorded by the band before Control Denied main man, Death Mastermind Chuck Schuldner's untimely passing. So let me see if I can pick up where he talks about this, and we'll hear from the man, Steve DiGiorgio himself.
Mate, what do you reckon? I know that the files are absolutely fragmented to smithereens or so, but do you have a memory of the lines that you were contributing to that album?
Oh yeah, I got it in my drawer, in my desk in my music room. Yeah, I got we've had the sketches of the song since he was alive. He sent us the rough demos, and you could hear him singing the guidelines on it for Tim to learn how it goes. And yeah, we have they're not worthy of releasing, and we wouldn't do that to Chuck. But we have all the blueprints ready when we do it final. It's just fucking Tim died, and that really stalled it out after all the other stalling out that's been going on. And then some of the choices that were explored before we found Tim, we were going back and saying like, well, at least Chuck asked so and so to sing on it before, so let's go back, you know. And some of these guys are just older; they don't think they have the range. It's been tough, so I really don't know. It's been one of the hardest things to complete, but it seems like over the past, what did he die in 2001? So the past fucking 18 years, we haven't stopped trying, or at least thinking about it. You know, we haven't stopped at all.
No. So you're not against.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I was a big fan of that Control Denied album, The Fragile Art of Existence. It does seem to be a bit of a vortex of tragedy, that record, because obviously Chuck died, Tim Amar died, and I know this should be relatively common knowledge, but a conversation I had with Warrell Dane, he shared with me that he was originally meant to be the vocalist on this record, and unfortunately Warrell has passed as well. Question would therefore be, who could you get to do the vocals in the event that they decide to actually record those tracks? And that's a tough one. The name that instantly springs to mind is Chuck Billy, but I don't necessarily think that's the correct choice. You know, I thought of him just because he's so versatile. But like I said, that's a tough one. I mean, they could get Richard Christie, they could get Steve DiGiorgio, and I'm sure they could get Shannon Hamm. I'm sure they could get kind of the bass guitars and drums from that original record, from that first record, back together in the studio and get them working together. But doing vocals, that'll be a different matter altogether. But by the way, make sure you check out that interview. Shout out to Andy McKay Smith and Scars and Guitars. It's only a half an hour long, but it's really, really good. They go in depth on a lot of behind the scenes stuff to do with death, to do with kind of just Steve's playing, etc. It's a great interview. And Scars and Guitars, generally speaking, is a very, very good podcast, even if I do say so myself. Okay, my friends, I think that's probably about the right place for us to wrap it up for this week. I want to say thank you very much to everybody that tuned in, for everyone that stuck around until the very end. Really appreciate it, as always. I'll be back next week. Finally, going to be dropping that Martin Collar interview. Martin Collar, of course, the founder, the main man over at Prophecy Productions. So a bit of industry talk on that one. And then the plan for the week thereafter is to have Gigi from Heavy Arabia. You'll recall that Matt McGeachy from Cryptopsy mentioned her as the gateway to Cryptopsy playing in Saudi Arabia. Really fascinated to talk to her about the reality of doing what she does in a country like Saudi Arabia, and just learn a bit more about her background. Then I've got a couple of others in the pipeline coming up probably over the course of the next 2-3 weeks. It's going to be a while before I do these double takes again. We'll see what happens. If I go to Beyond the Gates, I might have so much material that I need to do it. But I think you probably got your doubles for the year done and dusted now. Can't believe we're at the halfway mark of the year, quite frankly. But anyway, my friends, whatever it is that you are doing and wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.